All right, guys, now we've come to the third section of the podcast itself, diving into the nerfs that have been brought into Savage. We actually have the statement that it came in patch 6.21's patch notes themselves. A lot of interesting perspectives I'm already seeing online, especially I've seen even already in this live stream chat talking about how people were already clearing it, like why the need now for Savage updates. And before we get into the notes, because I'd like to cover the pure context, Chris, what's your read right now with this adjustment in patch 6.21?
I wish they hadn't nerfed it. I think people were clearing it, and I think people that had not cleared it were getting closer and closer to clearing it. What I wish they had done instead was there were certain comps that made it mathematically either improbable or impossible. And I think that's an issue. This game has historically buffed classes recently. In recent history, it's buffed more than nerfed, where it says, okay, and so it feels like it's been majority buffs. And so I think you could go do that, right? You could go give, it was like a 600 DPS difference to jump to Paladin, from Paladin Warrior to Dark Knight Gunbreaker. Mm-hmm. They have better mitt, so maybe don't give them all 600, but give them 350, give them 400. Get Machinist on the board. Why is Machinist not on the board? Okay, and so like, let's see some other class comps become viable without nerfing the existing ones, and so that there's other ways to play, because there's always been imbalance, but A, the imbalance is at a larger scale than it's been in the past, but B, some of the imbalance has meant that there are people above the line and below the line being can clear. When historically in 14, when we've been seeing classes that are out of alignment on the weaker end, as long as they can clear, we've seen world first teams go, yeah, I just played the one that I liked. Like, I'm just going to send it. Like, it's fine. Because that's what they're comfortable on, and that's what they enjoy. So the frustration came when you see those moments that I think Xeno really embodied, when he really kind of raged about having to switch to Gunbreaker. Or the frustration that you could hear in the oh so nice about it, but like you could kind of hear the disappointment in Lama Todd's voice as he kind of switched to Dark Knight. When it's like, if you want to clear, you're going to need every little bit that counts, and that became really frustrating. But I wouldn't have nerfed it. I think we need fights at all tiers. So I think 5 needed to be as easy as it has been for even Party Finder groups to clear. I haven't gotten my clear yet, but there are a lot of people that have. And then it needs to scale up to, like, I like the idea that there's something aspirational, that like you're not going to get 8 in week 1.
Well, also, especially because then when it comes down to it, like, oh, you cleared it. Like, are we talking about putting an asterisk next to it? Because like, did you clear it before it was nerfed in terms of that? And
no, I don't like to gatekeep. You would hear me say that, except I'm behind my gate.
Now, Cosmos says the job balance of 14 has actually been the worst it has been since Heavensward. Are you feeling something along those lines?
So, Brian and I are not really affected by this stuff because we're not at that level. We not only don't clear that level of content, but we make enough mistakes in the game that the issue is not our class. I am not sitting at Warrior Ceiling going, oh, if I could just go a little higher, I guess I'll switch to Dark Knight. And if I switch to Dark Knight, yes, it might be doing better DPS. My Dark Knight's not. Like, I'm not good enough at Dark Knight that I can catch what I can do on a Warrior. So I did some, I got an EX4 clear, and somebody in that group did a really good job of keeping an eye on the combat log, and they put that in a spreadsheet and uploaded it to a website. They were just fast fingers there, their calculators. And so they were able to work out, probably with a fairly decent level of detail, kind of roughly how much damage I was doing at each stage of the fight. And even keep track of which abilities I used and didn't. And according to their guess, I missed about 15% of my globals. I think I missed like 83 global cooldowns or something like that. And so I would say that, like, if I'm missing globals, class balance isn't what affects me. like maybe one of them was like die less. Like, what if you just died less? Like, that would be good. So maybe in the future I could die less. So I don't think class balance affects us. So anything we say from this point on in this, just know that's coming from a place of Brian and I are casuals that spend a lot of time with the game, but at a casual level. And so class balance very rarely affects us. Like, I like Machinist because I use Machinist in the open world. An open world burst on Machinist is a blast.
Yeah, I think essentially I do agree with this statement, though, especially when it comes down to having followed the game for so long. When was the biggest discrepancy in class balance, and when we're like certain classes just considered like a no. And the OCP's always worked. Now I'm never worried about the fact that job balance right now is not necessarily where it needs to be, but that's something that I trust that they'll work and get on that. And so I remember legitimately putting out a paladin guide and getting like, people were just like, why are you like, paladin's the worst? And I was like, just wait 2 weeks, guys. Like, literally just wait 2 weeks and we're going to see. Like, I don't think it's going to be the worst in 2 weeks. Oh, turns out, shocker, Brian knows what he's talking about. And all of a sudden Paladin was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. But it was just like, I'm putting this out because I know that we're going to see some changes, and those changes are going to be valuable. And so it's like, yeah, like at the end of the day, like if you're not doing Savage, I don't think there is a job imbalance. I don't think it actually, you're going to ever feel it, because outside of that, the difficult, challenging content, every bit of this content is just face roll easy. Like, it is not challenging unless you step into the challenging tier. And then outside of that, like, you're going to go and have a good time. So honestly, with like, for that, play what you want to play and what you enjoy to play. But if you're playing what you want to play with the idea of that you want to step into harder content, I would say right now, definitely be talking with the Balance Discord and getting a good idea about where that is. So if you want to invest your time, because it's not just gear, there is a skill gap here. There's like, and so if you start to be able to push yourself into that upper echelon of skill, then yes, you might get frustrated whenever your job is not performing to the skill that you're bringing to it.
So I know Yoshi P kind of addressed it a little bit, but the other thing is, like, we've also had challenging content. They have a chance to balance content every time they roll out changes, but your internal testing team needs that to be a static target and only adjust potencies when they say there's potencies. They don't need anybody else on the team touching stuff. Stop touching things. I'm working here. And so they're trying to balance this content. We had a Savage tier with 0.0. We had an Ultimate with 0.1. We had a Savage tier with 0.2. We're getting Criterion Dungeons with 0.25. Mm-hmm. We're going into another Ultimate in 0.3. We're getting another Savage in 0.4, as well as additional Criterion Dungeons in 0.5. We're getting additional Criterion Dungeons. When is it pencils down? Like, they are constantly testing. So I will say, from a balance standpoint, they have a very hard job in Endwalker, which had substantial across-the-board combat changes, to kind of continue to mess with potencies and not accidentally mess with somebody who's like in the middle of testing and they're like, hey, you broke this. So like the testing team has had a hard job.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into kind of the reasoning behind this HP adjustment, so that way we're also make sure we're covering officially from the devs and what their logic is, and kind of then talk about that as well. So the HP of the 8th Circle Savage has been reduced. This adjustment applies to both phases of the battle. To our endeavor to create an encounter more challenging than the 4th Circle Savage, the team responsible for final adjustments spent a great deal more time than usual working on balance for this raid battle. Under normal circumstances, the DPS of this team serves as the base for determining a boss HP value that results in clears and close to the time limit as possible. However, as extra time was reduced in testing this battle, the team's overall performance proved to be higher than usual. As a result, the base values used for adjustments were too high, with the final values roughly 1% higher than intended. We have reduced the boss's HP to bring the battle in line with our initial balance projections, and we apologize for any inconvenience caused. So,
I mean, you could also just get good, is what Yoshi B is saying.
Yeah.
I mean, our experience was if we just played well. So like, but you know, we don't want you guys doing that. So we're going to bring it back a little bit. The fact that they play test clear fights differentiates them from WoW.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means that you're now tied to a static set of people. You're tied to these testers. No matter how good or bad they are, you're tied to these testers. And WoW does test, and they have a very talented internal test team, but they can't test everything. They release too many fights per tier to test every single comp and every single strategy and all of that. And so things fall through the cracks. So they're making adjustments to their raids in real time during the World First Race. And there's bugs that people find in real time in the World First Race. But the World First Race is also like 6 to 10 days long, as opposed to 14s where like, is it going to be over or under the 24-hour mark? Like it's fast. It's fast. They have a hard job. They spent time doing their job. But in my mind, like, they produced an incredible first 4 fights, and they produced the hardest ultimate ever. I don't know how many of those testers are the same testers. Um, and they're probably testing Criterion Dungeons right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And internally, they built Crystalline Conflict. And based on the feedback and the base that he's played with devs and based on everything that he's been described, it sounds kind of like what came out at a panel years later about Hearthstone. So I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Hearthstone at Blizzard.
Am breaking
But
down?
basically, they had an idea of releasing a card game that would kind of pull from these different Blizzard properties and would be this fun, easy to approach. So they built it in like Flash or something like that internally. And they thought, let's just see if it's fun. Blizzard, it was revealed later that the founder said they've actually killed more projects than they produced. So let's just see if this is even fun. So internally, he said, hey, this is available. If you guys have some downtime at work, give it a shot. And give us some feedback. We just want to know internally, is this game even fun? Because if it's not fun, we're not going to spend resources building an actual version. And they ended up with a problem where they had to send out a company-wide email. This was a BlizzCon panel when they talked about this, where they said, okay, the Hearthstone time on the clock needs to stop because it's killing company-wide productivity. Like, we get it. It's fun. We're glad you're having a good time. Feedback acknowledged. We're going to build it. We're going to release it. This is too much. Crystalline Conflict seems to be that. So like, I just wonder, like, are these playtesters also just spending a lot more time playing at a high skill cap? They may be the same number of hours per week, but are they playing Crystalline Conflict? Are they playing the Ultimate? Are they playing Savage 1 through 4? And then they got additional time to test 8.
They got good.
They might just be the best them.
Yeah. Well, like, you kind of think about the workhorse analogy, but between Clydesdales, the more that Clydesdales work together, the more that they can pull themselves. And then essentially then the expectation of, like when you then factor out like, oh, y'all are a team that have been playing together for 8 years and you guys know each other and, you did the test and, okay, yes. But at the end of the day, like, the fact that people are getting clears, like, I think essentially what you look at is the jobs that aren't performing. And so we saw the Warriors got some buffs, and Machinists, apparently, at least the memes that are running around, like, it feels like Machinists are still left out. Like, what's going on there? But like, at the end of the day, like, I think hopefully you kind of do that. But they nerfed it. They the last time we saw that they did something like that was actually with the first coil of Bahamut with Quintania. It was like 7 years ago. Like, it was like people were not clearing the content, and they went back and had to look into it because it was weeks. We were all kind of watching to see, like, man, this is really, really hard content with Twintania. And then eventually they had to go in. I think one team got a clear on Twin before they actually had to go back and kind of nerf some of the mechanics.
People are clearing this.
Right. That's the difference in that regards. Like, this is the first time they've done this since, years ago, unless I'm mistaken or I'm not even remembering one. A4S got nerfed. When was that, Virtual?
So maybe, I thought that was 2015, but I don't know. I thought that's what people said. But either way, nerfs are uncommon. So we're back to a very like Scott Zone complaint, in my opinion. If anybody remembers Scott Zone, this is a parable.
And his
there
quick,
once was
and
a mythical man. The mythical
Zone.
man was a wonderful streamer. Everybody loved him. In this mythical tale, everybody thought he was amazing, and he was trying all the content on minimum item level blind, and it was entertaining for all. And he was a very talented player, and he came in and he was clearing through the fights, and a new tier released while he was working through this, and he took a break to clear the new tier. So he cleared the new tier, and then he was going to go back to clearing all his lower minimum item level fights. And when he got to the end of the tier, he was asked to give his thoughts. And he said the fights were amazing. The mechanics, the environment, the music, the detail, the story around them. It was an incredible experience, absolutely astounding. But as I look at the pace that I'm clearing the old content, there will come a day where all I'm going to have is the current content. And so I do ask myself at the current dev cycle, which remember has gotten longer now. It was one fight every like 7 months back then. Now it's one fight every 8. We get 4 fights. What if I get caught up and I only have 4 fights and I have to clear those 4 fights over and over and over and over for 7 months? Is that going to be exciting enough because of the repetition? So the one complaint I have, the only complaint I have about this tier is it would be really neat if there were more fights of this caliber What if we could have like 5 or 6? What if we had more fights? Because I'm coming from WoW, and in WoW we get more than 4. Yes, the tiers are further apart, but we get more than 4. And I'm loving this game, and I just want more of this great thing. Ultimately, that led to a whole downfall because then people sent death threats, and then it turned into a ban, and then we lost Scott Zone. So it turned into a whole thing. But the complaint was, what if we got more fights? So if Savage is meant to be an invitation to people that are ready to move beyond extreme, then the first fight needs to be approachable. That first fight also needs to be something that can be down fairly easily in a very minimum number of weeks so that you can begin getting gear from it, so that then anybody who struggles with the second fight, that kind of soft nerfs where each week it gets a little bit easier to clear the second fight because the first fight is providing more and more and more gear to you and the general population at large. And then it needs to stagger up. Now that needs to work its way up a scale so that the last fight is a real achievement, and it requires high skill, or it takes enough weeks of gear that the high-end players have already cleared and the low-end players are getting there through this kind of cap, this nerf that really just happens as our average item level on the server rises and our average knowledge of the fight and strategies rises. And so it kind of nerfs itself as time passes. Now, that curve has to be very, very sharp when you have only 4 data points, as opposed to if we had, say, 8 data points for a tier. Then I think people being like, oh, well, I'm 6 of 8 on Savage. And I'll be 6 of 8 for a few more weeks, and then we'll get enough gear and we'll get good enough that I'll become 7 of 8 on Savage. And now we're working on 8 of 8 of Savage, but we're clearing the first 7 relatively quickly. We're clearing the first 7 in one raid night. So we're getting a lot of prog on 8. I think we're going to get it down. And I think there's a real advantage to that 14 suffers from. Now, the advantage of less fights is that they've been able to be well tested. They've been able to release them consistently every 8 months. So, I would say if you're looking at WoW and saying, well, WoW has more fights. Yeah, but WoW releases patch every sometime between 6 and 32 months. Like that's not a plan. But it would be nice if we had more fights so that you could ramp this skill up, so that when the last one was so hard people called for nerfs, we would say, no. Leave the last one as something to be attained as the step between Savage and Ultimate. But it doesn't feel good when you can't clear 25% of the fights, especially when it's comp based, that there are specific classes that can't clear.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's going to be interesting to see. Overall, I'm more geared up and more ready to go into the Criterion setup. So this is hope maybe I don't see myself doing the 8th circle anytime soon, but we tried to actually do that last at least P5S last Thursday before I ended up having that emergency that pulled me to the hospital. That was a big unfortunate thing because I was really looking forward to doing that. So hopefully we'll maybe do some jump in more of that again this Thursday. So who knows? But guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That's really what there's to be said about it. I got nerfed. That I don't know. Being that people were getting more clears, it just seemed like that I think other adjustments could be made, but I'm glad that we got to see some of the jobs get buffed, and note that in terms of the timing that it takes some of these things to happen, they're getting the data, they're seeing what they can do as a part of that. We didn't want an A or B patch that we had in the spring that really just kind of threw PvP for a loop. So we don't want that. So in terms of their testing and their rollout, I think essentially the next big round that we will see, we would be in 2.5, unless there's anything else that comes out dramatically about it, and we might see some machinist nerfs buffs then at that time. But Chris, why don't you wrap up?
What if machinist was left alone because it's really good in Criterion? I don't know enough about the problems with machinist to know, is it better in 4-man?
Right. All of a sudden you're
because something's synergy, right? Like a ninja synergy works well with 8 people, but does that drop off as you drop to less people? So they're gonna have to start balancing for if they want Criterion Savage to be hard, there's gonna be classes that are good in Criterion and aren't as good in Raid, and vice versa. And historically speaking, 14's balance has been much better than many other MMOs. So historically, when this community is complaining, I have a tendency of rolling my eyes because most of the people complaining aren't clearing the content. And if you're on Devour Prog in P5, there's no attacking the boss in that phase. It's not your DPS. You're getting hit by stuff. And B, you're not reading your tooltips. And then, so people are well, this guy that's the top 1% player in the world complained, and so that affects me. No, it doesn't. You're down here with me. Get used to it. And so historically, but also in addition to that, we're typically arguing about really small single-digit percentage differences. And there are other games where there are like just dead classes. Like they're way off. And you invest a lot more time in getting geared up, and that gear is not shareable to other classes. So, like, I don't know. We'll see. But I would be hopeful that Machinist is going to get some buffs with Criterion, and that it's going to be really good in Criterion. But that's just my silver. It's probably not. You guys are probably screwed. I guess play Bard.
Let me get that. Let me get that copium.
Play Barter. Play Barter Dancer. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry.
Sorry for now.
Go get another extreme weapon. Transfer your gear over. Cosplay with a pistol.
That's why we continue always advocate have at least a backup job, whether it's in the same role, more importantly, maybe in another role within this game, just so that when things like this happen, you don't find yourself starting over at level 1 or level 30 or level, like at whatever the kind of the tier step up is. So yeah, we're gonna keep you guys up to date on that, and as it kind of gets flown in and structured. So my grammar aside. That's the show. That's the topics themselves. I put in chat the link over to Twitch if you guys want to continue your day with us as we continue on with our MMORPG coverage itself. We are looking to put this show as a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show around 10 a.m. in the morning, as long as that kind of works out for schedules and things like that. So that's something we're looking to test this week. So guys, let us know your feedback on the frequency of the shows, on the topics of the shows. We'd love to hear them. Also, if you're listening to MP3, be sure to give it a rating, because that's a great way to help its discovery. If you guys enjoy this, like, sub, share, and check out the Discord as well if you guys are looking for some communities to get involved in some game nights. Now that Data Center Visits a thing, like, let's play. So, Chris, do you got any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I mean, we're going to start moving to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're going to start that by doing it this week and then immediately breaking it next week, because I'm taking the 23rd through the end of the month off for my first vacation since February, and a big long one, because my wife was able to get off work that week. Worked well for her, and we've been married 10 years. So this year we want to do something special, at least spend some time together, at least just not be working. So that's where I'll be. But we're streaming a lot, so definitely come hang out, and thank you guys for being here.
All right. And with that, guys, this has been the Crystal Core Radio Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us as a part of the live show. Thanks so much for listening to this as a part of an MP3. Thanks so much for being you. And we'll see you in the next show and or video and or highlight. Until then, take care.